Welcome to the Wealth in Yourself podcast, a show dedicated to helping you master the complex subject of money by simplifying it through stories and actionable advice. I'm Josh St. Laurent, and this is Wealth in Yourself. Welcome to the Wealth in Yourself podcast, where we help people to design their ideal life and take control of their time and money. I'm your host, Josh St. Laurent. Today, we're joined by Jason Brown, principal and broker in charge at Brown Enterprises. He's been doing big things at a high level in real estate for over 24 years, and I'm so excited to hear what he's been working on and his journey up to this point. Jason, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely. Yeah. Glad you're here. We met when I was in Charlotte.
Right.
You were doing big things then. You're doing big things now. So maybe for the people listening who aren't as familiar with you and what you do, can you tell us a little bit about your background and what you do?
Yeah, I'm a real estate developer, primarily developing a fairly large apartment complex here in Columbia, South Carolina. It's going to be Keystone Luxury Apartments. The development company is B&B Keystone Development. So we've got a 15-acre tract that we're developing. We're starting on phase one, which is going to be 64 units. Once built out, it should be about 240 units, about a $90 million development. Phase one is, about a quarter of that. So once we develop it out, we're going to look to lease it, possibly go ahead and get a sale for it once it's done, or we may just hold on to it, develop the whole complex out. There's also some other thoughts of doing kind of a multi-use development. We could put some self-storage units over there as well. But right now we're working through phase one. We should be going vertical in about 2-3 weeks, which is real exciting. It's the largest development that I've ever done. Before this did, single developments, owned a lot of condos, apartments, townhomes, that kind of thing. Sold them out several years ago with the goal of developing my own apartment complex, which is what we're doing now. The reason behind that is, when you own the whole complex, you can control it more versus if you're owning apartments here, apartments there, condos here, condos there. That became a challenge because we would have the nicest units in the development, but if the rest of the development's not going well or starts to make a turn, you can't really control it. So, sold out around 18, 19, I think, and had been planning to do this for quite a while. Then started the exit to get out of all what I had. COVID hit. We were supposed to start March 2020, but when COVID hit, we decided to, pause, sit back, figure it out. Nobody knew what was going to happen at that point. So we actually started November of 22 with all the site work. So ended up forming a site work company, B&B Site Work, bought a bunch of excavators, dozers, this kind of thing, formed a site work company, took down the land, developed it out, and now we're about to go vertical. So that's the first time we've done that as well. So just started looking at, kind of the landscape of the marketplace, where it was, the costs associated with doing it. And, by forming my own development company for the site work, we saved a substantial amount of money, which made the project work because the cost changed so much pre-COVID to post-COVID with all supply chain issues and all the costs. So had to kind of value engineer to figure out how to get it back on budget because the price probably doubled, after COVID. But it's going great now. It's real exciting. We just ordered our framing package. Should have that here in about 2 weeks. It was just real exciting.
Yeah, that's huge. I want to talk more about the development project, but I'm interested if you can kind of paint a picture for the listeners of maybe a timeline of, how'd you even get into real estate? How'd you get started on all this? And what was kind of the journey to get to the big project you're at now?
Yeah, I started investing in real estate around about 2000. I think we went through a recession around 2000 because, you had the tech market crash. So we went through a recession. Then I started buying foreclosures back then. They were real small properties. I tell the story a lot. A lot of people laughed at me because I was buying these little apartments that were ugly and in neighborhoods that weren't the greatest. And, people that don't know would say, well, why are you buying this condo here, this apartment here? It's not that nice. But my strategy always was, and as you listen to people that know what I own, my house, my things are meant for that, and investment is an investment. So if I'm going out buying a $2 million lake property, I'm not going to make any money renting that property out. You have to buy something where there's value, where you can buy it. So we would buy these little ugly properties, real inexpensive, a lot of sweat equity fixing it up myself, renting it out, and was making very, very small amounts of money. And, I knew that at that point, I couldn't go to a bank and say, hey, let me borrow $4 or $5 million. I have a dream. So I think the first place I bought was honestly $15,000, $20,000, a little real inexpensive apartment, fix it up, rent it out, $400 or $500 way back then. And, shortly thereafter bought a second, a third, a fourth, a fifth, just kept buying small units and you start to put it together. But then you can start to make some money over time. They were cash flow properties. I wasn't flipping or anything back then. And then around 2006, 2007, kind of right before the real estate market crashed again, I sold out of everything I had, made a good bit of money. And then we went into a real estate recession and started buying as the prices were falling again. So by the time I exited 2018, 2019 at the top of the market again, I was able to sit on a substantial amount of cash to go into the apartments. So that's kind of how it started out, just real, real small, a lot of sweat equity. Also ended up learning to be a general contractor through doing that. I was vice president of a bank here in Columbia, South Carolina, worked there and was doing this on the side and, nights, weekends, that kind of thing, just putting them together, learned how to work, employed a lot of different people, and then eventually got a general contractor's license and, made it much bigger, started doing, a lot of flips, renovations, that kind of thing. Having all the license was really important. And the same thing as far as getting, the price in line with the development that we're doing now. Wearing so many hats is how it works. Being the developer, being the general contractor, being the broker in charge. So I'm not paying for all those disciplines that you would normally have to. And so it just cuts a substantial amount out on the front end and on the back end that can make it very, very profitable.
Yeah, I think that's important. And something I've noticed about you that's very different than a lot of other real estate investors that I talk to. You've got all the different arms of your company. You're able to do things at scale. And I want to revisit that. But if you can talk to along the way, there must have been some fundamental things that you learned early on that you've been able to use and kind of replicate as the projects get bigger. Can you speak to that?
Well, I'm real serious about what I do. And really, my business is extremely important outside of my business and my family. I don't have a lot of hobbies and things like I'm always on it. I'm always studying. I'm always planning. I'm always reading. And I'm always trying to figure it out. I'm always trying to figure out a better way to do it, a quicker way, a better way, a more profitable way. One of the things with investing in real estate is, obviously you've got to figure out a way to either make it rentable or make it saleable and do it in a way that's also profitable, right? Because if you're not making money, it's not a business, it's just a hobby. So, finding ways to value engineer where I can make something very aesthetically pleasing, but maybe not spend a substantial amount of money. So I look at a lot of different design ideas. I do a lot of the designs myself. Actually, I designed the entire apartment complex, designed, my house that I'm in, designed several other houses. So even though I'm not a licensed designer or I don't have a certificate in that, I'm pretty good at it. So as far as things that you replicate, I mean, obviously you're going to replicate the successes and you're going to try and minimize the failures.
Was there a big event that happened that you really learned from and you said, hey, let's never do this again? Or, I'm going to pivot and I'm going to go this direction, based on what happened. Was there a time like that?
Oh, yeah. I was just telling this story yesterday. I was talking to one of my subcontractors, actually a plumber that works for me, and he was kind of asking me some similar questions, how'd you get where you are now? You're doing development. And I look at a lot of these different shows, Flip This House, all these different design shows. And when I first started, I wasn't really making very much money trying to flip because the goal wasn't right. The goal was volume. And I quickly realized the goal is not volume, the goal is profitability. And I would design things like how I want to live. And so I would spend a lot of money on the design. And then you find out that the marketplace isn't responding to that because if you're in an area and the price is X, if it's 500 or whatever, and you're trying to make it sell above that price, it's not going to work in that market. So you can spend all the extra money on design, but the comps are going to be the comps. Now you can sell for a little bit more than that, but I started doing real high end design, spend a lot of money, and people would just say, hey, the house up street, $40,000 less. You hear it enough and you say, okay, I got to figure out a way to be in line with the prices in the area and still be profitable. I still don't cut corners, but you just use materials that are a little more cost effective. we just do real high end designs on, flips that were below 200. And everyone be like, no one's doing this, what you're doing. And there's a reason why, because it is extremely profitable. So, we switched the business model and it worked out a lot. But, honestly, not investing in extremely expensive rentals and flips, there's kind of a sweet spot in every marketplace. I mean, out there in California where you are, I mean, it's a much higher sweet spot. In this area, it's a little bit lesser. Right now with what's going on with the economy and interest rates, we're not flipping anything. We pivoted to the apartments because rents are going up. And if interest rates are going higher, people can't afford to buy a house. They have to have a place to stay. They're going to rent. So rents are going up, which, is going to make it that much more profitable. Hopefully the cap rates come back in line by the time we're done so we can get an exit on it. But the cap rates right now are not working in our favor. But I think we should be done with the development March of 24, and hopefully cap rates will come back in line around then. They were sub 5%. We're hoping to get something around 5% to do an exit on it.
Yeah, that's exciting. That's soon. I mean, you said you're going vertical in the next couple weeks, it sounds like, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's going to be huge. I wanted to ask you, for people listening who are maybe earlier on in their journey of real estate investing, any strategies they can implement, any things that you would suggest in the environment that we're in, any advice that you could give to those folks as far as what they should be doing or maybe shouldn't be doing?
As far as what you should be doing, I mean, you have to know your market. So every market is different. So I have people ask me a question about, is this a good price? Is this a bad price? It just really depends on where you're at. I mean, out there in California, the prices are crazy. Here they're much more in line, but being really educated on your market. And I would always say, having all your licenses, because, that's just going to be so important to you, because you control information, as far as if you have a real estate or a broker's license, you have access to information that maybe other people don't have. I mean, with the internet now, with all the different online platforms, I guess information more readily available now than it was in the past. But even still, that's not necessarily the same information you're going to get if you're a real estate broker or a real estate agent, because you can get additional information. So access to information is the most important thing. And honestly, not following trends at all. Following trends is never good. Being concerned, honestly, with what other people think. I was telling the story the other day, and it's kind of what we touched on a little bit earlier. When I started buying these little apartments and condos, people thought that, this was funny and, why are you doing it? But you can't get the 100th apartment till you got the first one. And so you have to get in the game. You have to start someplace. And a lot of people wait for a perfect opportunity to get in the game. And there's just really not a perfect opportunity. 5, 10, 15 years later, you're still waiting on the perfect opportunity that doesn't exist. So getting in, because a lot of times you'll figure things out as you're going through it and you'll learn from it. So, I would say getting in the game, but at the same time, it doesn't mean getting in the game in a reckless manner. Just being educated, being safe, and focusing on it and not having a hands-off approach. I mean, a hands-off approach never works, in my opinion. I know people that, just want to invest and they stand back, and it just doesn't normally work out. I know there's a negative connotation with the word control now, but you honestly have to be in control. If it's your business and it's your money and it's your life, to just take a hands-off approach and say, hey, I don't want to be controlling. Most people that are very successful, they control their environment. They're controlling what they're doing. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if you don't take that approach, it's probably not going to work out. As far as being an entrepreneur, I was looking at an interview yesterday, and the person was talking about they worked a 9 to 5 and they left the 9 to 5 and said, hey, I'm going to work for myself and I want to do what I want. And they said, I'm working more now than I ever was. So, working for yourself is not necessarily less work. There's an unlimited upside. There's also an unlimited downside. But if you go about it the right way, you're going to be very, very successful. I left banking in, I don't know now, it's been 5, 10 years. I really don't know. And since I left, it's just worked out so well working for myself. I don't think I was ever designed to work for anyone, and I never can work for anyone again. I was at my CPA's office one day and I had to sign a bunch of checks. He sent me back in this room, and I was sitting in this little room and the wall started closing in. I felt like I was in a cubicle, man, and I had flashbacks to my days of working for someone. It just wasn't good. But, I definitely love working for myself. have the autonomy to do what I want to do, which is generally a lot of work. I mean, but that's just what's real important to me. And some people are that way, but you can be a good artist at whatever it is, but if you don't have the business side, it doesn't work. So working for yourself isn't for everyone, but it's definitely great.
I'm glad you went there. We have a lot of business owner, entrepreneur listeners, and I was hoping you could talk a little bit about how you built up Brown Enterprises, all the different divisions of it, and also just the importance of having that control, delegating, building the team, because I think that can translate across, not just real estate, but other businesses too. And you're a master at it. So, yeah, I'd love if you could say a little bit about that.
There was a guy many years ago, he used a phrase at the time, but he talked about vertical integration and it kind of stuck with me, vertical integration. And that has been my goal to have vertical integration from A to Z, because if you do, you can be so profitable with whatever your business is if you're controlling all aspects of it, because there's revenue streams from everything, or there's revenue going out from all the different disciplines of what you're doing. And if you can control all those or own all of those, or at least have parts in all of those, not only can you control where it's going at, but you can be that much more profitable. For example, a lot of real estate developers are paying a general contract to develop whatever it is. Well, there's obviously substantial markup on it because the general contractor's got to make money. Having the general contractor's license and the understanding of it cuts out so much more money, which makes it that much more profitable on the backside. Having the broker's license on the front side gives me access to information, saves commission money. On the backside, if you're talking about a 20 or a $90 million development, I mean, having the broker's license and not necessarily paying that whole commission is huge. So those things are real important. There was a guy many, many years ago when I used to work out at the gym. He was an older guy, and he said, Jason, you need to get your real estate license. I said, why do I want a real estate license? I don't want a real estate license. At the time I was young, but it stuck with me. And eventually, you know what? He's right. And over the years, the amount of money that I've saved on commissions is substantial. That and being able to manage the properties, being a broker in charge, you can also manage property, have a property manager's license and all that. I mean, again, all these revenue streams are coming at you. So, otherwise, if you've got a management company, you're probably paying them 10%, 8%, just depends on what it is. If you're putting those dollars back in your pocket, not paying to someone else, you made an extra 10% right there. So, you increase your return substantially. Same thing if you're able to do the work, or your company's able to do the work instead of paying someone a retail price to fix whatever it is, you're saving so much money, and it just makes your profitability go way up. So being able, in whatever the business is, it doesn't have to be real estate, but vertical integration of whatever, where you can control your revenue streams, is just very, very important. And you didn't ask me this yet, you'll probably get to it, but the most important thing to me is equity in whatever you own.
Vertical integration and equity. Okay. Can you say more about the equity piece that you're talking about? Are you talking about at the beginning of the deal, or is that just a metric that you're as omnipresent as you're analyzing things and going through projects?
I mean, to me, equity is more important than cash, right? Because if you believe in what you have, the money up front is not that important. The money on the backside from the ownership percentage or stake that you have is going to be much more important than whatever money you're going to get up front. The money up front is an employee's thought process. Well, right now I want X. I want to get a salary. Well, you're probably never going to get rich getting a salary. But if you have equity in something that you own and you believe in it and you know what you're going to do, most people don't know what you know. And if you believe in yourself, the most important thing is the percentage of ownership that you have in whatever it is that you're doing. And you can take that to anything. You can take that to show like Shark Tank, what they're doing. You can take it to athletes, entertainers, actors, whatever. I mean, what everyone talks about now on these podcasts are the deals they struck early on, and how they didn't make any money because they didn't have any equity or ownership in what they created. I mean, you've got musicians, they're creating this, they're writing the songs, they're performing, they're selling the albums, they're getting small portions of their money, and the record labels, everyone else is getting all the money. You can take that to athletes as well. You can take it anywhere you want to take it to, and the talent is not getting paid. And I will never let that happen to me or my family. So what's omnipresent, the word that you use, is owning everything I'm doing.
I love that. I think that's an important lesson.
Even if it takes that much longer to do it. Because, a lot of people, they may want to do a bunch of deals and they're making small percentages on these deals. Well, now you've got to do 100 deals or whatever it is, 200 deals, or you work forever and you never really make a lot of money. Or you take your time and go into what the lion's share. It may take longer, but on the back side of it's going to be that much better. So with me, that's really, what kind of has happened with this development that I'm doing is just going at it the right way to make it, a huge score on the backside of it. Short-term pain for long-term gain.
That's right. I love that. What's next for you and the company? Do you feel like there's more vertical integration to be done? If forward looking into 2024 and beyond, is there anything you're excited about?
Well, excited about finishing the development next year, at least phase one. So, phase one is 64 units. And then after we get through phase one, we'll figure out what phase two is going to be, which again could be another 176 units, could be self-storage units across the street because we've got two parcels right there. So, kind of making it a development. It may be mixed use, but just getting through the first portion. So I'm excited about what happens after we get through phase one. But really, that's really it right now, just that whole complex that I'm working through. And, once we get through that, I'll figure out the next thing. I've got some ideas, but don't want to have, 15 irons in the fire where you're not really focused where you need to be. But yeah, it's real exciting. You got to come see it.
Yeah, I will. I definitely need to get down there and check it out. I'm going to pivot a little bit here. I wanted to ask you if there was anything that you've thought about doing and didn't pull the trigger on.
Honestly, I don't think so. I really don't think so. I think anything that I didn't do wasn't meant to be. And I don't really have a lot of regrets because you wouldn't be where you are if you didn't do all the things that you did. There's been a lot of lean times, a lot of hard times, things that you work through. I think those are real important because that builds character. If everything comes easy, you don't know what to do when you face adversity. I was reading an article yesterday, and that's one of the things that was talked about. It was talked about, the failures and the losses teach you a lot more than the wins sometimes, because if you look at it the right way, there's been lean times a long time ago, and those things for me have made me say it's never going to happen again. I don't come from money. I've worked really, really hard to get to where I am, and I've got three daughters that are everything, and I want to give everything to them, and I teach them all these things, hard work, dedication, perseverance, and just being very, very disciplined. And those things are real, real important. Discipline.
Definitely. Is there anything, if you could go back and give advice to let's say 30-year-old self, is there advice that comes to mind that you wish you knew then that you know now?
Well, I mean, there's always good advice, things you could have done sooner, but I would give and do give advice to people younger than me that ask me for advice. But again, I don't know that I would go back and change anything at 30 from what I was doing at 30. Would have been nicer to have been further along at 30 for sure. But at the same time, if you're not prepared for it, you can lose it. One of the benefits when I was in banking all those years is you would see people like yourself with what you were doing. You deal with people with money. And so you see what people do to make money, how they lose money, how much money they have, how they got it. And you can talk to these kind of people. And so one thing that I would see a lot of with entrepreneurs is they may have a huge score on something. And because they're an entrepreneur, they want to go back in and get a bigger score. And a lot of times they lose it on the second one. And so what's been real important to me is making sure that doesn't happen. I mean, the score that I'm going to make on this complex is going to be nice. And I'm going to do things after that, but I'm going to make sure that I go about it the right way. So just watching and learning from what other people are doing and seeing someone that has good characteristics and taking something from that, say, you know what, I like what Josh is doing here. I want to implement that, what he's doing. I like what Eric is doing, or I like what Mike is doing, I like what Joe's doing. I study people a lot and how they're successful, and everyone has good characteristics and traits. Maybe not everything they do you would agree with, but the positive things that are good, I try and take those and implement on myself, and things that I see are negative, I try and stay away from them and not make those same mistakes.
Yeah, I think that's huge. Like studying people, what makes them successful. Did mentorship play a role at all? And in your life, did you have any big mentors that you learned from?
I never had anyone that said, I'm your mentor and you're my mentee, but I've always paid a lot of attention to everything around me. People may not know it, but I pick up on everything that's around me all the time. My attention to detail is substantial at the point of possibly being a control freak or whatever it is. But again, there's a guy, Grant Cardone. I know you know who he is, and all your listeners will know who he is. And, he talks about that. It is not a negative thing to be controlling. I mean, a lot of people think control is a bad thing, but who wants to be controlled? No one wants to be controlled. If you can control your environment dealing with money or what's around you, that's a good thing. Paying attention to the small details. And, sometimes in business, it's not necessarily about making friends. I'm good to the people that work for me, that work with me. I'm fair. But at the same time, you can't allow quality or other things, attention to detail to leave because perhaps you don't want to say something to someone about their performance or about their work product, whatever that work product is. Well, then it falls back on you. So, paying attention to all the details, seeing all those things and making sure that it's implemented properly. And again, you can look at really any field you want to, whether it's an athlete, whether it's an entertainer, whether it's an actor. The people that are good are basically control freaks and they pay attention to everything. And same thing with investors, paying attention to everything, knowing your numbers, knowing what's going on. I mean, if it's real estate or whatever it is, understanding, negotiating the price of that framing package and make sure you're not paying an extra million or 2 million or 5 million on a framing package or an extra 10% or 20%. Same thing with the subs, bidding it out, making sure that you're not paying way too much on a subcontractor. That doesn't mean that the lower price is better, the higher price is worse, but going through all the work and not just taking the hands off approach, saying, okay, this is it, this is what we're doing, and actually monitoring the entire process, every single aspect of it. I mean, my business is not a very large business. It's an extremely profitable business. I would say my profitability is almost second to none because of controlling all the revenue streams. I can do less revenue and make more money than people that are doing substantially larger revenue than I am. And that's important to me. And, I manage pretty much all of my projects and everything that's going on. I'm on the job sites daily, watching every piece of lumber that's going up. I'm watching all the rebar that's going in the ground and I'm focused and I'm paying attention to everything. So mistakes will cost you a lot of money if you're not catching mistakes. You catch them later on, it's so expensive to fix it. So being on the front side and trying to minimize mistakes is real important in any business that you're in.
I think that's an important message and one that honestly we don't really hear a lot, about taking control. I was having a conversation the other day with someone. We were talking about how dangerous those people are out there who, kind of have this attitude of it is what it is, and they don't want to have their hand in the pot. They don't want to take control. So I think your message is sort of the opposite of that. And I like that.
Yeah, the it is what it is, and I don't believe in that in any way. And I'm big on that with my children, with my wife. Really, I don't believe in that in any way. You have to take control. You're responsible for your life. You're responsible for your successes and your failures. One of the biggest things about me is I'm responsible for everything. It doesn't matter whether it's someone else's fault. It's my responsibility. I accept responsibility 100% all the time, no matter what it is, because if you don't accept responsibility, you're allowing basically someone else to be in control of your life. Well, if Josh would have done this, I would be successful. If Josh would do that, I could have been successful. So you're going to base your life on what someone else is going to do for you? No. I mean, my wife says to me a lot that I like to make all the decisions. And that's not necessarily a negative thing. It doesn't mean that I don't respect everyone that's around me. It doesn't mean that all my business partners, I don't respect them. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I'm responsible for whether it works or it doesn't. If I take bad advice and I go bankrupt, the only person I can blame is myself. Well, I got some bad advice. I lost everything. I can spend my life blaming on this guy, but I still lost everything. And, today with Google and this kind of thing, people think research is Googling something. It's really not. Research is multiple streams of information, taking that information, compiling it, sifting through it, and figuring it out no matter what it is that you're doing, not just taking any one source and just running with it. Just whatever it is that you're serious about is you have to be obsessed with it. And if you are, it will generally work out. But, we had a situation a month and a half ago. We had some engineers that were designing things about the site that we're working on. And long story short, we had a problem with Department of Transportation. And once we had that problem, all the engineers basically pointed fingers at the other engineer and said, "Hey, what we designed was right. You just can't build that." I was like, I spent six figures on engineers to just tell me at the end of the day that I can't build what you designed. I mean, but on the front end, I wasn't, I guess, questioning enough, and it came back to bite me. And the way we figured it out is I honestly redesigned the entire development myself, and it worked out. It actually saved a substantial amount of money with the way I redeveloped it. But you have to say, how come the engineers on the front side weren't looking out for my best interest? And it doesn't mean that they were bad people, but kind of as you say, it is what it is. Most people take the approach of, I'm going to do the bare minimum. Okay, I'm going to do this design. This is someone else's fault or someone else's problem, and not looking at everything the right way. I try to take a 360-degree approach to whatever I do. If you hire me to do something, I'm going to go above and beyond whatever it is that you ask about. I'm going to talk to you about a bunch of things you never even thought about. If you're asking me whatever it is, I'm going to not only about these three things we're talking about, but you can see there's other 15 things here. And most people don't take that approach. So to make a long story short, we were going to have this retaining wall across the back of the property. It was going to cost over $1 million to design this wall. At the end of the day, the wall couldn't be built there because the Department of Transportation didn't want it. And the engineers were trying to get us to just try and force this wall that was never going to work. What I ended up doing is we decided, okay, well, what we're going to do is we're going to slope the elevation of the back of the property. We're going to elevate the buildings, problem solved. Looking back, why couldn't the engineers have done that on the front side? I'm not an engineer. I didn't go to school for engineering, but I got common sense. It just made no sense once I really looked at it. But on the front end, I didn't question all of it enough. And so that comes back to taking control and questioning and making sure that you're making the ultimate decision. And generally when I do that, it works out. Generally when I don't, it doesn't.
Yeah, I think all these concepts tie right into each other, right? Like when you take the responsibility and that extreme ownership and you say, hey, this is on my shoulders, I'm not going to sit here and blame anybody else, then you do the due diligence, you do the research, you make it work. So I think that's admirable. I want to transition over to the big three, but before I do, is there any questions that I didn't ask you that you wish that I did?
Not particularly.
All right, we'll dive right into the big three then. So, number one, what does living a wealthy life look like for you?
It's definitely got to be my wife and children. Definitely has to be them. And providing the life for them that I want them to have is extremely important, always has been. Pretty much everything I do is for my wife and my three daughters. I couldn't be happy with all the money in the world without my wife and children. It just wouldn't work for me. So my family is definitely very important to me. So wealth is definitely my family. Monetary wealth, very important as well, because, you have to have it to take care of your family, but just providing them everything that they need is what's most important for me.
I like that. If you could give one message to someone working to gain financial freedom who isn't there yet, what would it be?
One message to gain financial freedom: bet on yourself every time. Bet on yourself. I'm big on that. Bet on yourself every single time. But when you bet on yourself, you have to take that ownership, that control, and be extremely serious about it. A lot of people think running a business is, I've got a business here, I'm running a business, but does the business make sense? Is it profitable? Is there a point in the marketplace for it? How do you drive revenue? How do you drive profits? All of those things are real important. So betting on yourself is it.
I like that. Last but not least, if you only had $1,000 and we're starting over, what would be the first thing that you do with that money?
Had $1,000. There was a TV show about that, right? And Grant Cardone was on. Did you see that?
I did not.
I forget what the name of it was, but they took him and like two other either multimillionaires or billionaires, and they set them in a town they never been to, gave them $1,000, and they had to make their money again. And he was actually on that show, and that's what he did on that show. But I've actually been there, Josh. When my wife and I got married, we were on our honeymoon and our house got struck by lightning and it burned completely down and we lost everything. And I didn't even have $1,000 at the time. So I've actually rebuilt from nothing before. So what's the first thing I'd buy with that? That I don't exactly know, but it definitely can't be done. I've done it.
Wow. I didn't know that story. We'll have to talk about that sometime. That's wild. For people looking to connect with you online, where would they go to find you?
Well, I'm not a social media guy. I do have a LinkedIn page, Jason Brown on LinkedIn. My website is brownenterprisesfirm.com and berealestatesc.com. But I'm not a social media guy. So, LinkedIn may be the best way or go to the website, get my phone number and call me.
Cool. Well, we'll link it in the show notes. That's a wrap. Thanks, Jason, for coming. Appreciate talking to you. Thanks, everyone, for listening. This has been the Wealth in Yourself podcast, where we help people to design their ideal life and take control of their time and money. Our guest today was Jason Brown, principal and broker in charge at Brown Enterprises. We'll see you next week, and thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Thank you. The Wealth in Yourself podcast is hosted by me, Josh St. Laurent, and edited and produced by Ray Haycraft. To learn more about how to make your money work for you, visit us at www.wealthinyourself.com and connect with us on all social media at Wealth in Yourself. This podcast is educational in nature and is not meant to be investment advice. Please do not construe anything said to be advice, and the opinions of the guests may or may not represent the opinions of Wealth in Yourself. This podcast and the information presented are separate from my employment at Golden Gate University. Still, they are part of my mission to make no-cost financial knowledge more accessible. If you like the show, please take a moment to leave us a review. We read all of your feedback, and we want to make sure we cover the topics that matter most. If you have a specific subject you'd like us to explore or a guest you'd love to hear interviewed, don't hesitate to shoot us a direct message. And as always, thanks for listening.